Hey everybody and welcome back. About a month ago, I asked people on YouTube, Reddit, Discord, and Twitter to share their Stardew Valley marriage opinions with me. We got over 1,500 responses, which absolutely blows my mind. I closed the survey a few days ago and started putting together some insights. I think I'm at a good place to share what I've found, but let me know in the comments if I've left any of your questions unanswered. If you did miss this survey, don't worry. I'm thinking about another one already, but I'll probably wait just a bit so I don't bore people to death. There are timestamps in the video description, so if you're curious about a specific part of the data, feel free to hop around. And if you enjoy this video, consider dropping a like, maybe sharing it, and if you're feeling extra spicy, you could even subscribe. Now let's get down to business. I ran the whole survey through Google Forms, which did a pretty good job, actually, of getting the data for me. A lot of it really laid out effectively and in an attractive way. And just because I didn't already cover it, this is a video that, if you wanted to, you could honestly just listen to it. I'm going to be covering everything I talk about. The only thing you'll be missing are some graphs, which, if you love graphs, this is the place to be. But if you like the data, also, you could just stick around and throw it on while you're driving or whatever. So we started off with Rank the Bachelors, and this is the first place where I realized that I can't make surveys. Because I said, rank the Bachelors, 1 to 6. And I assumed, it's a ranking, so you'll put number 1 is your favorite, 6 is your least favorite, you're ranking them in order. But I got a lot of feedback almost immediately that said, I didn't know how you wanted me to rank this, because in a lot of surveys that I do, you go from worst to best. On the right side, number 6 would be like your best option, number 1 being your worst. So I had to add a little bit of clarification there, and that's another reason why we might see another survey in the future, but maybe tweaked a little bit. We started with the Bachelors, and you can see kind of the way that the charts go. Alex looks like nobody really loves him. A lot of people just think he's okay or dislike him. Elliot has a weird swing. You kind of either love him or you hate him. Harvey is pretty well liked, and I'll get into a little bit more information in the Excel sheet when we get that far. Sam is totally mid. You don't hate him, you don't love him. Sebastian is absolutely loved. And this is a great graph, by the way. I love this one. That slope is amazing. And Shane, oh my gosh, Shane, just like twice as many number 6 absolute hates as anything else, which I thought was amazing. So looking at Rank the Bachelors here, it looks like Sebastian is coming out ahead. But again, this is kind of hard to read because this is just, showing us how many people rank them in each place. And I'll break that down to exactly how the percentage of votes came in a little bit. Rank the Bachelorettes was a little, I guess, a little more crowded. I kind of expected Abigail to pick up a few more in the favorites, in the ones here. But that didn't really happen. So as we look across, we can see Emily, most people think she's like okay to bad, but nobody really hates her. Haley, though, Haley is an anomaly. You either kind of like Haley or love Haley, but not very many of you do, or you hate Haley. And like the majority of people hated Haley. So I thought that was interesting. I shouldn't say majority, that's not literally half, but it is pretty wild that Haley has 590 votes for worst bachelorette. Leah over here, kind of similar to Sebastian, actually, the same kind of slope. We see people really like Leah, and nobody really hates Leah, to be honest. Maru, I would say the only reason Maru is not higher in the 6s is because those people probably hated Haley. But you can see nobody really, that took this survey, nobody really seems to love Maru all that much. The further you go, the more votes she gets, so the worse and worse. And then Penny is just like flat across the board. Other than nobody really hates Penny. So I thought Penny was actually pretty interesting as well. It seems like you don't have strong opinions on Penny as a group, as a collective. So I thought that was pretty cool, actually. These ones, I think, are a little more interesting, and this is a place where I think that Google Forms did a great job, because I did not do this again in Excel. Everything that I needed was right here. So this is cool. Favorite marriage candidate. We got just under 1,500 responses. This was an optional one, but a lot of people took advantage of it. You can see Sebastian, 18.3% of the voters chose Sebastian as their favorite marriage candidate. And then in second, we have Leah. And in third, Elliot. No, that can't be right, right? No way. I guess Harvey and then Elliot. Pretty interesting. Again, would have expected Abigail to be a little bit higher up. And then Shane also coming in at 9.2. So we have Sebastian, Leah, Harvey, Elliot, Shane, and Abigail. And then everybody else is kind of spread out a little bit more, with Maru being the lowest at 3.1%. 46 people. 46 people picked Maru as their favorite. I do know that I pronounced that. You can say wrong, but it's right to me. So, moving on. Least favorite marriage candidate. So this one was a far and away Shane won this one. And let's scroll up a little bit because this is going to be interesting. So least favorite marriage candidate, Shane and Haley have cornered the market there with almost half of all of the votes. Yeah, people don't like Shane. People don't like Haley. I think we knew that coming in, but it is interesting to see how the numbers play out. Then we have Alex and Elliot. So Elliot being a favorite in some ways and a least favorite marriage candidate for some other people. Thought that was pretty interesting. It's that valley, you know, you either love him or you hate him, I guess. We also have Leah is the least favorite marriage candidate, I believe. Let's spin around real quick. Emily, Abigail, Sebastian at 31. Leah has only 18 votes for least favorite marriage candidate. People love Leah. People really love Leah. Or at the very least, they don't hate Leah. This was probably my favorite question, and I scrolled up just to kind of hide it. But favorite or first candidate that you married. This one is telling. The first candidate that most people that took this survey married was Shane. And then Shane is the most hated. And I kind of do wonder, is that because they married him, they saw his room, and then they divorced him? Is that why you hate Shane? I wouldn't be surprised. But also Sebastian, another strong candidate for first marriage. We also have Abigail in here, and this also does not surprise me. And then Leah is actually coming in at a healthy 10% of the votes. So Sebastian, very popular. Leah, very popular. Shane, not universally, but very, very much a not loved character, but an early marriage for many of you. So I thought that was interesting. And then Abigail coming in here at 12.4. She was decently popular up here. So that makes sense as well. This one is pretty fun. Which giftable villagers would you marry if given the option? A pretty wide spread here. I added Krobus late, so if you missed Krobus, I was asked if I could add Krobus. He's not a marriage candidate per se. You roommate with him, but many people said that they would want to marry him. So if you missed that, he was added later. But a healthy 34% of the people, 35% of the people would marry Krobus, but Sandy, more than half of the people that took this survey would marry Sandy if she were eligible. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Sandy could have been a marriage candidate, but we did not see that. We got Emily instead on the women's side. Other ones that are kind of interesting, Caroline at 20% of the votes. Dwarf actually at 13.7 is not too bad. I'm shocked that no one wants to marry Evelyn and George. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to marry either Evelyn or George. However, even less than either of them, people absolutely are not interested in marrying Lewis. Only 19 responders said they would marry Lewis out of 1,400. Yeah, 1,456. So out of 1,456 responses, we got 19 people interested in Lewis, and that is sad. That is sad for Lewis. But I think this is actually really interesting. Pierre's down there, not very loved. Pam actually about double Pierre. Linus doing pretty solid. Gus as well. Actually identical for Linus and Gus. That's pretty interesting. So it looks like, yeah, I mean, this is about where I expected. We would see, Sandy, Robin. I actually kind of thought Robin would be a little higher, to be honest. I thought we'd be hitting about the 50% mark. But some good stuff there. Some good stuff. Some interesting things. I'm going to skip the demographics ones. We'll cover that later. We'll get that in the Excel. Let's see. How old are you? This was kind of where I expected the numbers to fall. This lines up with my like analytics. So if you saw the post, there's a likelihood that you're 19 through 29. You know, a big part of my viewership falls into that age group. However, we had a pretty wide variety of responses. We had a ton of people that were 13 to 18. We had quite a few people that were in their 30s. And then it starts to kind of taper off. Not too many from 40 to 49, fewer from 50 to 59. 7 of you, 60 and over. Good on you. That's awesome. I love that. And then we had a bunch of people that, you know, were just not really interested in responding. So this was also a late edition, though I think I put it up in the first couple hours. So if you didn't see it, I'm sorry. But I asked, do you feel that your identity is represented by the marriage candidates in Stardew Valley? And I left it pretty wide open. You know, there are a few ways that you can interpret that. You know, a lot of people in the comments left comments saying they weren't sure exactly how to respond to that. They didn't know if I was asking about their age, for example, or their gender identity, or their sexuality. And the truth is, kind of all of them. So I just wanted to get a feel for whether people feel like there is someone in the game for them, you know, or that they feel like they are being represented. And I thought this was very interesting. We had only about 100 people said that they were not at all. You know, there was nobody in the game for them, or they didn't feel like they were represented in any way. Many people, and some people left comments kind of detailing how, but many people felt that they were somewhat represented in the game, but maybe there were some things that could be changed to make it a little more inclusive for them. A little bit over half of the responders said that, yes, you know, I feel that my identity is represented by the marriage candidates in Stardew Valley. So I think that is super interesting. We have a game that was made entirely by one person, you know, Eric Barone, Concerned Ape, and there's this wide spectrum of people, and we do see most people feel like they're represented either completely or in some way. So he did a fantastic job at pulling in different ways to represent the community of how many people have this game? Millions? So I thought that was just, I was blown away. I expected this to be a little bit higher on the nose. And we'll get into some of the reasons why people think that they're maybe not as represented as they could be. But let's hop over to the Excel sheet. And again, this one's not going to be as pretty. I don't use all the colors, but the data should be, I think, pretty interesting. Okay, we are over in our Excel sheet, and I have a few tabs down here, and we'll go through all of these just briefly, but this was kind of the big one. The main question that I was asking was to find out, how do you feel about the Bachelors and Bachelorettes in Stardew Valley? And the data kind of lines up. So we have, for the Bachelors, Sebastian taking 20.52% of the votes. So that's scaled. You know, we wanted low numbers. So essentially, Sebastian is the most likely to get a low number, like a 1 or a 2, that you ranked first or second or whatever. And then we have Alex actually in last place. So a lot of people thought that Shane would rank really high. I saw a lot of comments saying that people were ready to see like Shane dominate. Shane was actually the second worst ranked Bachelor, and I thought that was pretty interesting. But Alex, not because he had a ton of 6s, but because people just generally didn't care for him, actually ended up doing just slightly worse. So that was very interesting. Alex ends up being the least popular Bachelor aggregate. On the Bachelorette side of things, we kind of probably already guessed this, but Leah is in first with 21.27 of all voting, and Haley far and away the worst, though Maru is kind of down there. Other than that, it's I don't know. This one is a little more dynamic. We see smaller rises on the Bachelor side of things, with Sebastian kind of sticking out, everybody else kind of in the same area. But for the women, it does kind of go up and down a little bit, with some pretty low lows and some pretty high highs. You can see Leah actually scored, not that they're comparable, but Leah actually scored better than Sebastian, and Haley actually scored worse than Alex. So people have stronger opinions, it does seem, about the Bachelorettes. Now, I want to dive into some stats on the sexuality and preferences there, because I thought this was an interesting area. The only thing that I didn't really dive into was age, which would be another good one, maybe a follow-up. But looking across here, I took the data from the favorite marriage candidates, least favorites, and the first one that they married, and compared it against, ace, bisexual, heterosexual, homosexual, other sexuality. So we'll just quickly fly through those. For the ace favorite marriage candidates, Sebastian coming in at the top there, with Elliot actually in second. So that was pretty interesting. Not surprisingly, we do have a few that were left blank for asexual, which makes sense. And then for least favorite marriage candidates, I think it's actually pretty close. So 29 to 28, with Haley just edging out Shane as being just ever so slightly more despised. And for you asexual folks out there, most likely first marriage, Sebastian, followed shortly by Shane, 23 and 22. Although Abigail and Elliot were both up there, and we have a few people that never married as well, which again is understandable. Over on the bisexual side of things, we have this was heavy representation. We see Sebastian and Leah, and that kind of fits the more global stats as well, with Shane being easily the most disliked, with Haley 79 to 102. So we have a lot of bisexual folks that are not a fan of Shane, which fair enough. Again, though, pretty likely that he was the first person that you married, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. But Sebastian was the one that you probably married if you were bisexual. And the least likely thing for you was either never marrying, or many people just left these blank, which is totally cool. This was optional. However, you probably did not marry Haley first. So pretty interesting. Looking across the heterosexual stats, again, Sebastian most likely, with Leah actually coming in there at second. And I think, yeah, Harvey actually did edge out Elliot. So Harvey at 56, Elliot at 55, and this is just a count. This is not a percentage. So we'll get into a little bit more of how many of each identifying person took the survey in a minute. But the short version is, you probably married Shane first, even though you hate Shane. I love this. Across the board, no matter who you ask, there's a very good chance that they married Shane first, but they also think he's the worst marriage candidate. And that's amazing. I love it. When we look at the first marriage for the heterosexual, though, we see Shane and Abigail, actually. So even though Abigail isn't the favorite necessarily, Abigail was one of the very first marriage candidates that they married. So pretty interesting there. Homosexual favorite marriage candidate, Leah, far and away, not even close. And a great dislike for Elliot. And for Haley as well, and Shane as well. So this one's pretty spot on. If you are gay, you probably love Leah, and you probably married Leah. You may have also married Abigail or Alex, though. Pretty good chance there. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. In most of these cases so far, we've seen, I don't like Shane, but I may have married Shane. Where in this one with homosexual, we have, I love Leah, and I married Leah, and I still kind of hate Shane. So looking at other sexuality, and then we'll jump over to Pan in a second here. Least favorite, again, Haley. Most favorite, Sebastian. So we're seeing that kind of theme. Probably married either Sebastian or Abigail. So kind of standard across the board. You see that very frequently across pretty much all players. And then again, in Pan, we have Sebastian as the most popular, Haley as the least popular. However, probably married Shane. Probably married Shane. So no surprises there. So we're going to pop in and we're going to look at a couple of gender and sexuality demographic comparisons. Start real quick and just say, so I started this survey in May, and it went through a couple of iterations, and they were just live the whole time. And on Twitter, I was actually asked by some users to add trans as a gender option. I originally had, male, female, and I changed that to man and woman. And then I had non-binary, other, and prefer not to answer. And some people were saying I would feel more included if you added transgender as a gender option. And I did that. And I got a little bit of feedback, people thinking, that's inappropriate or offensive to list transgender as a gender, since that's a man or a woman, And ultimately, I did decide to leave it in. But I got some advice from Gamma Goop, shouting you out, I don't know if you're watching this, but on Twitter, that basically boiled down to, if we do this again, another question that basically just allows users to select like cis or not cis or het, cis or trans, would probably have helped. So you have, you know, man, woman, non-binary, prefer not to answer, other, whatever, and then cis or trans, and that would help kind of alleviate that. So thank you everybody for all the feedback on that. I really appreciate it. It got to a point where I was a little concerned to keep making edits because it was going to start to affect my data, but I got a lot of good info, so if I run another survey, that'll definitely be factored in, so appreciate it. So when we look at the sexual orientation of the players that took my survey, the majority, but a small majority, were heterosexual, with bisexual just slightly behind, and then we have homosexual and asexual almost tied, very, very close, and then our pansexual folks. And then we have some people that just were not covered, and I apologize for that. And then we had some people that just didn't want to answer, and that's totally fine. So I wouldn't say I'm surprised by this. I saw a lot of bisexual representation, which I think makes sense. If anything, I was almost a little surprised that the heterosexual and the bisexual were so close. So pretty interesting. And then how do you identify? Like I said, I originally had male and female in here and switched that over to man and woman. That just fits a little better. So thanks again for the feedback on that. And I just combined those. So we primarily had women taking the survey here. 861 folks identifying as women. And then we had men. And then it kind of scaled down a little bit more quickly. We had 9 non-binary folks. People that didn't feel like they were covered, people that did not want to answer, and then I did have about a handful, 21 people, who indicated that their best fit identity is transgender. So that was kind of the reasoning for it, was just making sure that people had an option to identify the way they wanted to. But I did like the feedback that I got, so I'll definitely be able to work that into anything we do in the future. And then the breakdown of you know, our gender and sexuality looks a little interesting. We have, this is not going to cover everybody because there were quite a few candidates, or sorry, there were quite a few responders that just left one or both of these questions blank, and it came to a point where I didn't want to have left blank. So this isn't all inclusive, but it's going to capture most of the responders here. The most common gender and sexuality for this survey was a bisexual woman, so shout out. Followed by heterosexual women, heterosexual men, and bisexual non-binary individuals. But you can see we have people answering from like the whole range, which is amazing. I thought that it's really cool that we don't have these just empty spaces. I mean, I have other hetero, okay, fair enough, but we have a complete representation of the community, I think, which was pretty cool if you ask me. It really shows that this game is available, you know, for people in really any situation. Some of my favorite comments, just quickly here at the end. I got a smiley face comment 10 times. That was the only identical repeat comment, though there were a lot of trends, you know. There were like, keep up the good work, love the vids. I got some comments that were like, how to possibly word things better, but I'll kind of leave those ones. I like this. Even though I'm a lesbian, I would literally blow myself up if Alex asked me to. Amazing. Love it. I hate Elliot so much, he should be removed from the game. Also, Emily is the best. Thank you. Appreciate it. I say somewhat, and this is that last question, because yes, it unveils all my specific damage is too on the nose for my fragile ego. And yeah, I got a lot of questions that were like, in reference to that last question, kind of explaining how they did or did not feel represented, and we have that in the other takeaways in a second. This person just said, I'm living in your walls, by the way, so that's cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. Also, somebody gave me their email in the comments. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. I did not collect emails intentionally. Moving on, some final takeaways here. Just some things that I noticed that I thought were worth mentioning, you know? Some things that the community wants. The community wants more people of color in their marriage candidates, which I think is fair. There's Maru, you know, and that's it. There was a common theme of people saying they wanted less player sexuality, so more like hard-coded sexuality, as in maybe Leah only likes women, for example, or maybe Sebastian only likes men or women or whatever. People saying that it made it feel like the game or at least the marriage candidates, were just player sexual. The one difference to that was Leah's ex kind of flips depending on the gender of the player that you choose. And other than that, it doesn't seem like there's much in the way of a foundation for why the marriage candidates would care for the player. So I thought that was interesting. This is something that I'm interested to hear from you. So please, 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 please let me know in the comments what you think about this, because I think this one is a little controversial actually, but it was a very, very popular comment that I got. People want older marriage candidates, and I agree with that one. I feel like sometimes when I play, I get the feeling that some of these people are too young for me to be marrying. So as we get players that are growing with the game, and we have players that are 60 plus, we got those demographics. We know that we have players out there. We just want people that are more like us. People want marriage candidates with a wider range of gender identity and sexual expression, so non-binaries, ace, trans representation. It's just not really there. So that was something that people were looking for and would be really excited to see in future games, I think. People wanted more non-romantic roommate options. So people wanted the ability to have, say, Penny move in with you instead of living in the trailer. You know, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you love Penny or that you want to be married, or maybe they move in as a roommate and then you get married later. And that's something that happens in real life. So I thought that one was interesting too. That could be an interesting mod or something. People want surveys where they don't have to put other, which is fair. And I apologize. You know, I tried to be pretty inclusive, but at a certain point, I just had to stop making changes because it was starting to affect my data. So definitely some stuff to keep in mind for next time. And I do appreciate all the feedback. So never feel like you shouldn't or can't say something to anyone, but especially to me. I guess I can only speak for myself. Lastly, people are thirsty for Sandy. Seriously, like half of the people that took this wanted to marry Sandy. So CA, if you're watching, I'm just saying. Anyway, thank you everyone for helping me collect this data. Super fun. I really love digging into it. If you have questions on anything, leave me a comment, pop into the Discord, send me a message, whatever you want to do, tweet me. I don't care. I can probably answer it. I may not make everything public just because a lot of it is attached to my personal email, but I'll try and get some stuff up on my Discord and on Reddit. So if you want to dig through, you can kind of look at some stuff as well. That is all I have for you. But again, just let me know what I missed, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thanks, everybody.